Former US President Donald Trump brands his successor Joe Biden an enemy of the state at a rally, while an investigation into materials taken from his Mar-a-Lago home continues. NASA says it will not launch its new rocket Artemis 1 this time after a hydrogen fuel leak wreaks havoc with the mission for a second time this week.
Exchanging blame, Moscow claims it has repelled an attempt by Kyiv to retake Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant as it goes partly offline amid shelling.
A record 33 million people have been affected by the heavy monsoon rains and flooding in Pakistan as UN agencies step up support to the government's relief efforts.
Several hundred French motorcyclists gather in the capital to protest recently introduced parking fees for 2- and 3-wheelers in Paris.
Supporters of former US President Donald Trump gathered in Pennsylvania on Saturday ahead of his first political rally since federal agents searched his Mar-a-Lago estate last month. Just a day earlier, a judge released a list of seized materials which included 18 documents marked top secret. The 76-year-old said the FBI operation was one of the most shocking abuses of power by any administration in American history.
The shameful raid and break-in of my home, Mar-a-Lago, was a travesty of justice that made a mockery of America's laws, traditions, and principles before the entire world. The entire world was watching, and they're shocked. They're shocked.
Trump also took the opportunity to criticise his successor, Joe Biden, ahead of the November midterm elections.
He's an enemy of the state. You want to know the truth? The enemy of the state is him and the group that control him.
But as Trump lays the groundwork for an expected 2024 presidential run, he faces a number of legal challenges. 48 empty folders marked classified were also found at his home.
One intriguing element that I'm sure investigators are trying to better understand is the discovery of dozens of empty folders bearing classified markings. And it's not clear at all from the document what was supposed to be in those folders, what happened to those documents.
This comes as Trump's former Attorney General Bill Barr says the US government appeared justified in raiding the former president's home and that he suspected they had good evidence of obstruction.
Launch control.
It's back to the drawing board for NASA's technicians. For the second time this week, a hydrogen fuel leak has shattered the space agency's plans to send its new moon rocket, Artemis 1, on a test flight from Cape Canaveral, Florida. A team of engineers had tightened the fittings after the first attempt. However, ground controllers say the engine began to leak on Saturday during the fueling process. For now, the mission has been called off.
Launch period 25 is definitely off the table. We won't be launching, this period ends on Tuesday. We will not be launching in this launch period. Launch period 26 and 27 will really depend on the options that the team comes back with, likely on Monday or early Tuesday morning.
While managers warned that leaks and sensor issues could prompt further delays, crowds gathered on Florida's beaches ready to witness the historic blast-off. Years behind schedule and billions of euros over budget, Artemis 1 aims to establish a continuous human presence on the moon.
It's been 50 years waiting for them to go back to the moon. It's way overdue. Since December 1972, when Gene Cernan left the moon, in this following December, it'll be 50 years. And I think we should have gone back a lot sooner. And I'm looking forward to this.
NASA says the next possible launch window is between September 19th and October 4th. Once the spacecraft launches, Artemis 1 will send its capsule named Orion on a journey of 2.1 million kilometres around the moon before returning to Earth.
Europe's largest power plant has partly gone offline amid continued fighting, according to the United Nations nuclear watchdog, as Russia and Ukraine continue to exchange blame over the shelling. Despite the presence of representatives of the International Atomic Energy Agency at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, the Kyiv regime once again tried to seize the plant. According to the Russians, two groups of motorboats, with a total of more than 250 people from the Special Operation Forces, tried to dock on the shore of the Kakhovka reservoir, which houses the nuclear power plant. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has offered Vladimir Putin mediation to help resolve the crisis, as it did for the grain agreement back in July, according to the Turkish President's office. While Russians and Ukrainians accuse each other of attacks on the nuclear power plant, fear gripped the population in the neighboring areas. Natalia Istokos, a mother of 3 who lives in a small village nearby, says that almost every day she can hear the sound of explosions. But it's not the shelling that scares them the most. As a precaution, authorities distributed iodine pills and masks to the residents. Some of the mothers now go with their children to pick up the pills at the same schools where their children used to have classes before the war.
Houses and livelihoods laid to waste as Pakistan reels from the devastating floods that have left thousands of families homeless. Another 57 fatalities have been registered by officials, bringing the total death toll in the flood-affected areas to at least 1,265. This woman says, "My house collapsed in floodwater. I am going through a hard time. When floodwaters hit, I took my children on the road. I come here to collect timber. No one from the government side is helping us in this trouble." Meanwhile, Sadat Ali is living in a makeshift shelter in Jafarabad, along with his family. He claims he hasn't received any help from the government or aid organisations. "My village is submerged in floodwater," he says. "We couldn't even get the stuff out. After facing hardships, I evacuated my children. You can see we didn't receive ration, a tent. We made a plastic sheet shelter and my children are inside and becoming sick." The United Nations Children's Fund says more than 3 million minors are in need of humanitarian aid and are at risk of malnutrition and waterborne diseases. According to the World Food Programme, it has expanded its operation and is providing essential food supplies such as flour, peas and salt to affected families.
Several hundred motorcyclists gathered in Paris on Saturday. They were protesting against the capital's introduction of parking fees for 2- and 3-wheeled motorised vehicles. Those taking part in the demonstration believe this new cost of parking will have a big impact on many bikers' lives. This member of the French Federation of Angry Bikers says that the people most affected by this policy are people from the middle or even lower social strata who have no choice but to live outside Paris because rents are far too high, and who have no alternative other than motorised 2- or 3-wheelers because they work on staggered schedules and have no means of public transport, i.e. bus, train or subways, because those transports are not well organised for them. Motorcyclists travelling into the city centre now have to pay €3 an hour and €2 in surrounding neighbourhoods. Officials say the measure is necessary to control high levels of noise and air pollution, as well as congestion caused by bikes. Voters in Chile head to the polls as they decide whether to accept a new constitution to replace the one in use since the Augusto Pinochet dictatorship. In 2019, anti-government protests swept across the country. The demonstrators' main demand was a new constitution to make the South American country more socially progressive and inclusive, but polls now suggest many no longer favour the constitution proposed. At least 50,000 people gathered in the centre of Prague on Saturday in protest against the government. The demonstration brought together various different organisations across the political spectrum. They were calling for the ruling coalition to do more to control soaring energy prices. They also voiced their opposition to the European Union and NATO, requesting military neutrality.
The occupied West Bank is maybe not the first place you'd think of when looking for an autumn beer festival. But thousands come here to Tebe each September to taste the brews concocted under the watchful eye of brewmaster Madis Khoury.
I grew up in the brewery since I was 9 years old, and I just watched my father and uncle and grandfather build a business, and I grew to love it so much that once I graduated from college, I decided to move back from Boston and work with the family and manage the business and learn the brewing.
Traditional dancing is part of the festivities. Madis reckons she could be the Middle East's only female brewmaster.
No one would expect beer in Palestine, right? Or a female brewer in Palestine. And yeah, I agree. Women all over in the beer industry have it very difficult. But I think I have it extra difficult being in an Arab-dominated in a male-dominated country, the Arab country, and also under occupation.
Tebe is a small Christian village that's now established itself as a global beer brand.